Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley. We are on chapter 11. Chapter 11 is long. It will definitely take us two readings, maybe three. We'll see how it goes. But let's dive in. Chapter 11, The Assassination of President Lincoln. I had never heard Mr. Lincoln make a public speech, and knowing the man so well, was very anxious to hear him. On the morning of the Tuesday after our return from City Point, Mrs. Lincoln came to my apartments, and before she drove away, I asked permission to come to the White House that night and hear Mr. Lincoln speak. Certainly, Elizabeth. If you take any interest in political speeches, come and listen and welcome. Thank you, Mrs. Lincoln. May I trespass further on your kindness by asking permission to bring a friend with me? Yes, bring your friend also. By the way, come in time to dress me before the speaking commences. Do what you want to do, but make sure I'm taken care of first. Just saying. I will be in time. You may rely upon that. Good morning, I added as she swept away from my room and, passing out into the street, entered her carriage and drove away. About 7 o'clock that evening, I entered the White House. As I went upstairs, I glanced into Mr. Lincoln's room through the half open door, and seated by a desk was the president, looking over his notes and muttering to himself. His face was thoughtful, his manner abstracted, and I knew, as I paused a moment to watch him, that he was rehearsing the part that he was to play in the great drama soon to commence. Proceeding to Mrs. Lincoln's apartment, I worked with busy fingers, and in short time her toilet was completed. Great crowds began to gather in front of the White House, and loud calls were made for the president. The band stopped playing, and as he advanced to the center window over the door to make his address, I looked out and never saw such a mass of heads before. It was like a black, gently swelling sea. Ooh, excuse me. Sorry about that. I am wondering what sort of public address systems they had. Did microphones exist back then? I don't think they did. Like, I know there were ways to amplify sound, but I've wondered the same thing about Jesus as he was speaking to the masses, but I just figured he was Jesus and he could project in a way that everybody could hear. I'm wondering how everybody heard. Let's keep reading. Maybe it will talk about that. The swaying motion of the crowd in the dim, uncertain light was like the rising and falling of billows, like the ebb and flow of the tide upon the stranded shore of the ocean. Close to the house, the faces were plainly discernible, but they faded into more ghostly outlines on the outskirts of the assembly. And what added to the weird spectral beauty of the scene, oh my God, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm not sure why I'm yawning so much. Let me get this together. And what added to the weird spectral beauty of the scene was the confused hum of voices that rose above the sea of form, sounding like the subdued, sullen roar of an ocean storm or the wind sighing through the dark, lonely forest. It was a grand and imposing scene, and when the president, with pale face and his soul flashing through his eye, advanced to speak, he looked more like a demigod than a man crowned with the fleeting days of mortality. The moment the president appeared at the window, he was greeted with a storm of applause, and voices re echoed the cry, "A light! A light!" A lamp was brought, and little Tad at once rushed to his father's side, exclaiming, "Let me hold the light, Papa! Let me hold the light!" Mrs. Lincoln directed that the wish of her son be gratified, and the lamp was transferred to his hands. The father and son, standing there in the presence of thousands of free citizens, I'm sorry, I don't feel like I'm sleepy, but perhaps I am. But I paused there because I was like, it's free citizens standing there, none of our enslaved brethren and sisterin. Is that a word? The father and son standing there in the presence of thousands of free citizens, the one lost in a chain of eloquent ideas, the other looking up into the speaking face with a proud, manly look, formed a beautiful and striking tableau. There were a number of distinguished gentlemen as well as ladies in the room, nearly all of whom remarked the picture. I stood a short distance from Mr. Lincoln, and as the light from the lamp fell full upon him, making him stand out boldly in the darkness, a sudden thought struck me, and I whispered to the friend at my side, "What an easy manner it What an easy matter it would be to kill the president as he stands there. He could be shot down from the crowd and no one would be able to tell who fired the shot. She's just, you know what? I can't be mad at her just randomly thinking about assassination plans. One, because assassination of the president was something that they had discussed previously. But two, like, I get it. I've never thought to assassinate anybody, but I do think random things. Like, oh, it would be easy to rob this place, or it would be easy to do this, or it would be easy to things that I would never do. But like you're in a situation like, oh, and I really don't think robbing any place would be easy. There are way too many cameras everywhere. And like, I'm not subtle. Like, people can pull out a phone and take pictures and videos. I'm not subtle. Okay, let's keep reading. I do not know what put such an idea into my head, unless it was the sudden remembrance of the many warnings that Mr. Lincoln had received. The next day I made mention to Mrs. Lincoln of the idea that had impressed me so strangely the night before, and she replied with a sigh, "Yes, yes, Mr. Lincoln's life is always exposed." I think I'm gonna stop this reading soon if all I'm doing is yawning. And we're only a couple pages into this chapter. All right, let me keep going. Let's find a good place to stop, and I'll stop, and you won't have to watch me yawn so much. I'm sorry, but it's the middle of the day. It's still morning. It's not late at night or anything when I'm recording this, but I'm apparently not getting enough oxygen, which is compelling me to yawn. And I'm sitting up here looking a little bit like Annette Funicello with my hair. If it were combed through and then like flipped at the bottom, I would be rocking my Annette Funicello vibe a little bit more. But as it stands, I'm all Annette Funicello-esque here. All right, let me keep reading this book. Stop yawning. Maybe eat something. Maybe that's why I'm feeling tired. All right, let's. Mm, let's keep reading. Yes, yes, Mr. Lincoln's life is always exposed. Ah, no one knows what it is to live in constant dread of some fearful tragedy. There are people who know what that feels like. And I would actually say most Black people in the U.S. have a low lying dread of what tragedy could befall us at any moment. I know I tell my son, who is 16 now, I just need you to come home. Whatever happens, if you get pulled over, if whatever's, I need you to come home. That's what I need from you every single day. I was driving home from an appointment this morning and a police car passed me, and that was fine. I wasn't worried. I wasn't speeding, I wasn't doing anything. But I literally thought in that moment, like, how fraught with difficulty it must be to be a police officer, because people are afraid of you, but just to be a person who I'm not afraid of the police, and I believe that they are there to help and to protect and to serve, and I will seek them out if I need them. But the dichotomy, maybe the double consciousness, to think about W.E.B. Du Bois, of something could go terribly wrong, though. And I'm not saying Black people own the market on this, but I'm saying, because I am a Black person and I've experienced it myself and know a lot of others who do, there's just this low level of dread of some fearful tragedy happening. And that's what Mrs. Lincoln is saying being married to the president must feel like. And I can't even imagine how that must feel, because I live a life of privilege and safety and all sorts of things. To be president, I was terrified for Barack Obama for most of his presidency, because I was like, somebody's going to try to kill this man. And I can only imagine he had many death threats, as I'm sure all presidents do. Like, I know I've said in our readings, it's not a job I want, but like, wow. So to be the wife, the spouse, because president may not always be a man, to be the spouse of a president, or it may not always be a heterosexual man. But anyway, to be the spouse of a president, whew, That's got to instill you with a lot of dread in many ways. All right, I'm going to keep reading. The president has been warned so often that I tremble for him on every public occasion. I have a presentiment that he will meet with a sudden and violent end. I pray God to protect my beloved husband from the hands of the assassin. Okay, I am going to stop there because the next sentence was not at all about that sort of thing, and we've kind of been talking on one line. The next sentence starts talking about pets. I don't know where it's going. I'm yawning and I'm hungry. I went off on tangents. We read a few pages of chapter 11. We're clearly going to have another reading. This is Behind the Scenes with by Elizabeth Keckley. This is Reading with Rashonda. I'm Rashonda Cade. Oh, y'all take it easy. Until next time.